At 3:27 in the morning, I was standing at the window of my father's study, drinking a glass of water in the dark, when I saw the headlights at the dock. I had not slept since Tuesday. My father had died on Tuesday afternoon. His funeral was scheduled for Friday morning at 10 o'clock. It was now Thursday, the early hours of Thursday, and I was the only person in his house. My wife was supposedly home, 3 miles away, with our daughter. I had told her I needed to spend Wednesday night and Thursday night in my father's house alone, to be with his things, to say goodbye in private. She had agreed without argument. She had been agreeing without argument for the past 8 months. The headlights at the dock did not belong to a vehicle that should have been at the dock at 3:27 in the morning. The dock was at the end of a private gravel road that ran behind my father's 2-acre property on Tiki Island, just south of Galveston. The dock was old. My father had built it in 1987, the year before I was born, and the only people who used it were family. My father had stopped taking his boat out 3 years ago when his hands started shaking from what we did not yet know was pancreatic cancer. I watched the headlights move slowly down the gravel road toward the water. The vehicle stopped at the dock. The headlights cut off. I waited for my eyes to adjust to the moonlight. It was a 2022 white Lincoln Navigator. It was my wife's car. I stood at the study window and did not move. The glass of water was still in my hand. I felt the condensation running down my fingers. I did not feel my hand. I did not feel my feet on the hardwood floor. I did not feel anything. The driver's door opened. A figure got out. The figure was a woman in dark clothing. She walked to the back of the SUV. She opened the rear cargo door. She reached inside. She began to pull something out. The thing was long and heavy and rolled. It was a carpet, a rolled carpet. My father's old Persian rug from his study. I would learn this later, but I knew it instantly. The rug had been in his study the morning of his death, when I had gone there to gather his shaving kit for the funeral home. It had not been there when I returned to the house Wednesday afternoon to spend the night. I had assumed Breyer had taken it to be cleaned for the wake. I had not asked. I had been wrong about that, the way I had been wrong about everything. The woman could not lift the carpet by herself. She pulled. She struggled. She got the carpet to the edge of the cargo bed and let it drop. It hit the gravel with a heavy sound that I could not hear from the study window 200 yards away, but that I imagined anyway. She dragged it toward the dock. The carpet was heavier than her. It was at least 7 feet long, and it had something rolled inside it. She knew it had something rolled inside it. She stopped halfway down the dock to catch her breath. She looked behind her. She looked toward my father's house. She did not see me at the window. The study window was dark. I had not turned on the light when I came in. She was looking right at the house, but she was not seeing it. She was seeing only the dock, only the water, only the next 90 seconds of her life. She kept pulling. She got it to the edge of the dock. She pushed it. The carpet went over the side. It hit the water with a sound that I did hear, even from 200 yards away, even through the closed study window. A heavy, wet, final sound. It floated for a moment. Then it began to sink. She stood at the edge of the dock and watched it sink for about 10 seconds. She did not move. She did not look around. She did not seem afraid of being caught. She seemed only to be making sure it was gone. Then she turned around, walked back to the SUV, got in, closed the door, started the engine, and drove away. I was still holding the glass of water. My name is Garrett Donovan. I am 43 years old. I am a civil engineer, and I own a small surveying and engineering firm in Galveston, Texas. I have one daughter named Lennox who is 11 years old. I have been married to a woman named Breyer for 14 years. The woman I had just watched dump a heavy rolled carpet into the bay at 3:27 in the morning was my wife. I met Breyer in 2010 at a Texas A&M alumni event in Houston. She was a paralegal at a corporate law firm. She was 27 years old. She had grown up in Beaumont, the daughter of 2 high school teachers. She had a way of laughing that made everyone in the room turn around. She had a sister who was a veterinarian in Dallas, and parents she called every Sunday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. My father met her 3 months after I did. He took us out to dinner at Pappadeaux in Houston. He ordered crab cakes. He asked her about her family. He told her his terrible joke about the engineer and the lawyer crossing a bridge. She had laughed harder than she needed to. After dinner, when she went to the restroom, my father had said quietly to me, "Garrett, she is too polished. Be careful, son." I had been irritated with him for the rest of the night. I had told him I was 31 years old and could pick my own wife. He had said, "I know you can. I am just telling you what I see." He never said it again. He walked me down the aisle at our wedding the following March. He gave a toast at the reception. He kissed Briar on the cheek when she became a Donovan. He treated her like a daughter for 14 years. Lennox was born in 2014. My father was 62. He cried in the hospital waiting room when the nurse came out and told him it was a girl. He had not cried at his own father's funeral, his own mother's funeral, or his own wife's funeral. But he cried that morning. He had wanted a granddaughter. He had wanted to teach a girl how to fish off the dock he had built in 1987. He did teach her. Lennox could tie a clove hitch by the time she was 6. My mother died in 2008, 2 years before I met Briar. My father had loved my mother for 38 years. He had not remarried. He had not dated. He had run Donovan Electrical Contracting alone, lived alone in the house on Tiki Island alone, and waited for his son and his eventual granddaughter to come visit him on weekends. He had given Briar a key to his house in 2012. She had used that key twice a week for the last 6 years to come over and help him with his books. He had hired her, in 2019, as a part-time bookkeeper for Donovan Electrical Contracting. She had wanted the supplemental income. The arrangement had been informal. He had paid her in checks from a personal account. I had thought it was sweet. I had thought it was a daughter-in-law helping her aging father-in-law with the parts of his business he was getting too old to track himself. I had been wrong about everything. I would learn later, when the evidence came out, what she had really been doing in those rooms. I would learn later why she had been so insistent, in the days before my father's funeral, that I personally carry the chest to the casket. She had wanted me to bury my father's evidence with my own hands. She had wanted to watch me lower my father's truth into the ground, then thank her for helping me through it. That is what kept me up at night, in the months that followed. Not the money, not the affair, not even the medications, the fact that she had wanted me to do it for her. I would like to tell you that I called the police immediately. I would like to tell you that my engineering training kicked in, and I assessed the situation rapidly and acted with precision and clarity. That is not what happened. What happened is that I stood at the study window for somewhere between 2 and 4 minutes, I have never been able to say which, and I did not move. I did not breathe in any meaningful way. I did not think any thought I could later remember. I just looked at the empty dock. I looked at the spot in the water where the carpet had gone in. I looked at the gravel road where the SUV had been. I tried to make my brain accept that the last 40 seconds had happened in real life and not in my imagination. Then I dropped the glass of water. It shattered on the hardwood floor of my father's study. The sound brought me back. I walked to the desk. I picked up the cordless phone. I dialed 911. The operator's voice came on. I said, "I am at 1827 Tiki Drive in Galveston. I just watched my wife throw something heavy into the water from my father's boat dock. I need someone to come." The operator asked me what I thought it was. I said, "I do not know, but I need you to send divers." She asked me what made me think it was something that needed divers. I said, "Because my father died on Tuesday, and my wife was just at his dock at 3 in the morning getting rid of something." She told me to stay on the line. She said she was sending units. The first patrol car arrived in 11 minutes. The second arrived 2 minutes later. By 3:51 a.m., there were 4 officers at my father's dock with flashlights. The watch commander on duty, a woman named Faye Beauregard, arrived at 4:08 a.m. She was 46 years old, a 20-year veteran of the Galveston County Sheriff's Office, and she was wearing a Texas A&M sweatshirt because she had been off duty when the call came in. She drove herself in. Detective Beauregard met me on the dock. She had a flashlight and a small notebook. She listened to me describe what I had seen for about 4 minutes. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she asked one question. "Mr. Donovan, where is your wife right now?" "She should be at our house in Galveston with our daughter. I have been here at my father's house since yesterday afternoon." "And you are sure the vehicle was hers?" "It is a 2022 white Lincoln Navigator with a small dent on the rear driver's side bumper from when she backed into a fire hydrant in February. I watched her pull up. I watched her get out. I watched her face for about 4 seconds when she came around the back of the vehicle. It was my wife," Detective Beauregard wrote in her notebook. Then she looked up. "Sir, I am going to call the dive team. They will be here within 40 minutes. While we wait, I am going to ask you not to call your wife. I am going to ask you not to text her. I am going to ask you not to do anything that would alert her to the fact that you saw what you saw. Can you agree to that?" "Yes." "Mr. Donovan, I am also going to ask you something I do not enjoy asking. Do you have any reason to suspect that your wife has caused harm to a person?" I looked at her. I said, "Detective, my father has been dead for 48 hours. He died of pancreatic cancer in a hospital bed surrounded by family. His body is at Heritage Funeral Home in Galveston, embalmed in a closed casket, scheduled to be buried tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Whatever is in that water, it is not a person." She nodded slowly. She said, "Then what do you think it is?" I did not answer for a long moment. I said, "I think it is the one thing my father was supposed to be buried with." She looked at me carefully. "Mr. Donovan, I think we are going to need to have a longer conversation, but not right now. Right now, let me get the divers." The dive team arrived at 4:43 a.m. There were 2 divers in dray suits and a support officer with a winch and a small pulley rig. The water at the end of my father's dock is approximately 15 feet deep at high tide. It was high tide at 4:43 a.m. The Galveston Bay is a brackish estuary. Visibility is poor even in daylight, and at 4:43 a.m., with only LED dive torches, the divers would not be able to see more than 2 feet in front of them. They did not need to see far. The carpet roll was sitting on the bottom mud, exactly where it had landed 20-some minutes earlier. The first diver located it within 4 minutes. He surfaced, gave a thumbs up to the support officer, took a breath, and went back down. The second diver attached the winch line to the rope that had been used to bind the carpet roll. The support officer began the slow work of bringing it up. I watched from the bench. The water was black at that hour. The dock floodlights cast a yellow circle on the surface. The cable from the winch made a slow, mechanical clicking sound as it pulled. Detective Beauregard stood at the edge of the dock with her arms crossed, watching. She had not put on a jacket against the November cold off the bay. She did not seem to feel it. The first thing to break the surface was the rope. Then the top of the carpet roll. Then the rest of it, rising in slow, dripping increments, water cascading off the wool. The carpet emerged at 5:16 a.m. It came up dripping. It was bound with maritime rope, 3 thick wraps and a knot, which Detective Beauregard recognized as a clove hitch and noted in her book. The carpet was a Persian rug, maroon and navy, about 7 feet long when rolled. The divers laid it on the dock. Detective Beauregard turned to me. She said, "Mr. Donovan, step back, please. Step all the way back to the bench by the boathouse. I do not want you any closer than that." I stepped back. I sat on the bench. The bench was the same bench where my father had sat with me when I was 10 years old, and he had taught me how to tie a clove hitch. He had taught me on a length of rope exactly like the one binding this carpet. The officers cut the rope. They unrolled the carpet. There was a wooden chest inside. The chest was approximately 3 feet long, 18 inches wide, and 12 inches deep. It was made of dark walnut. It had a hinged lid with brass fittings. There was a wax seal across the seam between the lid and the body of the chest. The wax was dark red. The seal had an impression in it, the impression of my father's signet ring, which he had worn on his right hand for 53 years, and which he had been wearing in the casket at the funeral home. I had not seen my father's signet ring on his hand at the viewing on Wednesday afternoon. I had not noticed it was missing. I had assumed the funeral home had removed his rings before embalming. I had been wrong. Detective Beauregard examined the wax seal. She looked at me from 20 feet away. She said, "Mr. Donovan, this chest is sealed. I am not going to open it without a witness who can identify the contents and without authorization from a representative of your father's estate. Do you know who his attorney is?" "His name is Hollis Tremaine. He is at his home in League City. I have his cell number. Call him." I called Hollis Tremaine at 5:24 a.m. I told him what had happened. I told him as much as I could in 3 minutes. There was a pause. He said, "Garrett, I am leaving my house in 7 minutes. I will be at your father's dock by 6:15. Do not let them open the chest until I arrive." I told Detective Beauregard. She nodded. She stepped close to the chest. She pulled out a small camera and photographed the seal from multiple angles. She photographed the rope. She photographed the carpet. She photographed the wet pattern of the carpet on the dock planks. She walked over to me. She sat on the bench beside me. She said, "Mr. Donovan, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." "Yes." "Why would your wife throw a sealed chest into the water instead of just burning it or driving it somewhere remote and burying it? Disposal in water is risky. Bodies and objects float, surface, get caught in nets, get found by divers. Why would she do this in the place most likely to be discovered?" I had not thought of this in the previous 90 minutes. I thought about it now. I said, "Detective, I think she did not have time to do anything else. I think she was racing against the funeral. The chest was supposed to be sealed inside my father's casket tomorrow morning before the burial. She had to get it out tonight. There was no other window. We picked up the chest from Hollis Tremaine's office at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. We were supposed to deliver it to the funeral home this morning at 8, where it would be placed in the casket before the service. My wife volunteered to handle the delivery this morning. I had agreed. So, she had the chest tonight. She had the chest tonight. My father had originally instructed Hollis to deliver the chest directly to the funeral home. Breyer had convinced me, 3 days ago, that family should handle the delivery as a final act of love, that it was something a son should do for his father. I had brought it up to Hollis. Hollis had reluctantly agreed with my insistence. I had insisted because Breyer had asked me to insist. I had handed her the keys to her own trap. And she did not have time to plan a better disposal. "I think she did not have time," Detective Beauregard wrote in her notebook. She said, "Mr. Donovan, I think your father knew exactly what he was doing." I said, "I am starting to think the same thing." Hollis Tremaine arrived at 6:11 a.m. He was 64 years old. He had been my father's attorney for 31 years. He was wearing a gray suit at 6 in the morning because Hollis Tremaine had not been seen in anything other than a gray suit since 1994. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He walked from his car slowly. He walked the length of the dock with the kind of deliberation that men of his generation reserve for funerals and depositions. He stopped beside the chest. He did not touch it. He looked at the chest. He looked at the wax seal. He nodded slowly, the way a man nods when something terrible has been confirmed. Then he turned to me. His face had gone pale. He spoke in a voice low enough that only I could hear. "Garrett, if this chest is outside the casket, your father was right about her." I did not know, in that moment, what he meant. I did not understand what "her" referred to. I was thinking of my mother, of my grandmother, of every woman who had ever been close to my father. I was running through faces in my head. I was not yet running through Breyer's. I would understand in 8 minutes. He turned back to Detective Beauregard. He said, "Detective Beauregard, I am Hollis Tremaine. I am the executor of Whitfield Donovan's estate. I am authorized under his will and under his explicit written instructions to open this chest in the presence of his son Garrett, if the chest is removed from the casket before burial under any circumstances other than my own act. Do you require any additional documentation?" She said, "Mr. Tremaine, I would like to see the written instructions." He opened the portfolio. He produced a 1-page document. It was on heavy cream paper. It bore my father's signature, dated November 14th, 2025, 2 weeks before his death. The document read, To whoever opens this chest before my burial, I, Whitfield Donovan, of sound mind on the date of this writing, instruct that this chest be sealed by my attorney Hollis Tremaine immediately upon completion of its preparation. The chest is to be delivered to my casket on the morning of my funeral and sealed inside before burial. It is to be buried with me. It is not to be opened by anyone, ever. Unless this chest is found outside my casket prior to burial, by any means and in any condition. If that occurs, the seal is to be broken in the presence of my son, Garrett Donovan, and law enforcement. The contents are to be examined and acted upon according to the instructions inside. If you are reading this paragraph, it means someone removed this chest from where it should have been. That person is not my friend. That person is the reason this chest exists. Sincerely, Whitfield Donovan Detective Beauregard read it. She nodded once. She said, "Mr. Tremaine, open the chest." He set the chest on a folding table that one of the officers had brought from the patrol vehicle. He produced a small letter opener from his portfolio. He carefully scored along the wax seal until it broke cleanly. He lifted the lid. The interior of the chest was lined with thick black velvet. The chest had been sealed well. There was no water inside, only a faint dampness at the edges where the seal had compressed. On top, on a black velvet cushion, lay a sealed envelope. Cream-colored. My father's handwriting on the front. One word, Garrett. Hollis Tremaine looked at me. He said, "Your father wanted you to read this first." He handed it to me. I sat back down on the bench. I broke the seal. I unfolded the paper. It was in my father's handwriting. It was dated November 12th, 2025. Garrett. If you are reading this, then someone has tried to keep this chest from being buried with me. I have a strong suspicion who that person is. I have spent the last 6 months gathering evidence. The evidence is in this chest. Hollis has copies. The originals are here. Your wife, Breyer, has been laundering money through Donovan Electrical Contracting since 2019. I discovered this in May of this year, when my new accountant, not Renton, who has been complicit, flagged a series of irregularities. Over 6 years, Breyer and Renton Calloway have moved approximately $1,800,000 through fake vendor accounts, offshore shell companies, and a tax fraud scheme that I will let the forensic accountant explain. Breyer and Renton have also been romantically involved since 2020. I have photographs, I have hotel receipts, I have email correspondence. I considered confronting your wife while I was alive. I considered calling you and showing you what I had found. I did not do either. I will explain why. In July, when my cancer diagnosis became terminal, I noticed that my pain management protocol stopped working as effectively. My oncologist increased my dosages. The dosages did not help. I asked the pharmacist to verify the medications I was taking against the prescriptions on file. The pills in my bottles were not the pills the pharmacy had filled. Someone in my house had been swapping my medications. Someone had been replacing my morphine with low-dose acetaminophen. Someone had been replacing my anti-nausea medication with sugar pills. Someone had been adjusting my chemotherapy infusion bags during the hours before my home health. Nurse arrived. I am dying anyway, Garrett. The cancer was always going to kill me. But my wife of 14 years, your wife, has been accelerating it for the past 4 months. She has been making sure I die before I can tell anyone what I know. I did not confront her because if I confronted her, she would destroy the evidence. I did not tell you because if I told you, you would confront her and she would destroy the evidence. I needed the evidence to outlive me. This chest is the evidence outliving me. If you are reading this, my plan worked. The chest was supposed to be buried with me. If she did not try to take it, she was not guilty. If she tried to take it, she was guilty. Her guilt would prove itself in the act of trying to bury it with me a second time. She tried. Daddy. I read the letter twice. I read it a third time. I did not move. The paper was shaking in my hands. I did not realize my hands were shaking until I tried to fold the letter and could not get the edges to line up. The detective said nothing. The officers said nothing. Hollis Tremaine said nothing. The Galveston Bay said nothing. I thought about my father in the hospital bed in his last week. I thought about the way he had looked at Briar when she came into the room. I thought about the way he had watched her bring him water, and the way he had set the cup aside without drinking it. I thought about the way he had refused, twice, when she had offered to help him take his pills. I had thought, at the time, that he was being a stubborn old man who did not want help. I had been wrong about that, the way I had been wrong about everything. He had known. He had been lying in that hospital bed, dying, watching the woman who was killing him bring him cups of water. And he had said nothing, because he was waiting for the chest to do its work. I stood up. I walked back to the chest. The lid was still open. There was something else inside, beneath where the envelope had been resting. It was a small wooden carved bird, maybe 4 inches long. The wood was darkened with age. The carving was crude and amateur, the work of a child. The bird had been painted once in blue and red, but the paint was almost gone. One wing was slightly chipped. I had carved it. I had carved it for my father when I was 8 years old, in a Cub Scout woodworking class in 1990. I had given it to him for his 38th birthday. He had said, that day, that it was the best thing anyone had ever made for him. I had not seen this bird in 35 years. I had assumed he had thrown it away, or lost it, or that it had broken in some forgotten move. He had kept it. He had kept it for 35 years. He had instructed his attorney to put it in the chest that was going to be buried with him. There was a second, smaller note tucked beside the bird. I unfolded it. Garrett, the bird is yours. Take it home. Carve another one for me to be buried with. The chest will need to be resealed and reburied, and I want something of you in there with me. That has not changed. I love you, son. I have loved you since the day you were born. Daddy. I sat on the bench by the boathouse and I cried. I had not cried at the hospital. I had not cried at the viewing. I had not cried during the slow 48 hours of preparation. I cried now, sitting on a bench beside a chest that had been pulled out of the water at dawn, looking at a wooden bird I had carved as an 8-year-old boy and forgotten about. After a long moment, Hollis Tremaine sat down beside me. He said, Garrett, your father came to my office in May, the day he discovered the laundering. He sat in the chair across from my desk. He told me what he had found. Then he asked me a question I will never forget. He said, Hollis, how do I prove what someone has done if they get to my evidence first? I told him I did not know. He said, then we are going to build something they have to come for. We are going to put it where they cannot reach it without exposing themselves. Hollis looked at the chest. He said, your father did not build this chest to hide the evidence, Garrett. He built it to see who would try to steal it. I did not speak for a long time. When I finally did, I said only one thing. He knew. Hollis nodded once, slowly. He knew. I handed the letter to Detective Beauregard. She read it. She looked at me. She said, Mr. Donovan, I am going to have officers at your home in Galveston in the next 20 minutes. Your wife is going to be arrested. I want you to stay here. I want your daughter to be picked up by a family member. Is there someone I can call? I gave her my sister Adair's phone number. The patrol units arrived at our Galveston house at 7:14 a.m. Briar was sleeping when they arrived. Lennox was sleeping in the next room. Adair arrived at 7:36 a.m. and gathered Lennox before her mother was led out of the house in handcuffs. Lennox did not see her mother arrested. Lennox saw her aunt's face and knew that something was wrong. Briar did not resist. She sat in the back of the patrol car in the same dark clothing she had worn to my father's dock 4 hours earlier. She did not ask for a lawyer. She did not ask for me. She did not ask for Lennox. When she was shown the chest in the police station 3 hours later, she did not cry. She did not deny anything. She looked at the chest. Then she looked at the officer. She said only one thing. He was supposed to die before he found out. Detective Beauregard told me that line later. She told it to me with her hand on my shoulder. She told it to me the way you tell a man something he is going to remember every day for the rest of his life. I have remembered it every day since. The forensic accountant Detective Beauregard hired was a woman named Sloane Pruitt. Sloan was 61 years old, retired IRS. She spent 4 weeks going through Donovan Electrical Contracting's records. She confirmed every figure my father's letter had listed. She traced the $1,800,000 to 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, held in the name of a shell company called Callaway Halsey Holdings. Renton Callaway was arrested at his home in Houston 11 days after Breyer. The medical interference was confirmed through pharmacy records, the home health nurse's testimony, and hair samples taken from my father's body during exhumation. The hair retained traces of medications for months and survived embalming. The medical examiner concluded that my father had been receiving subtherapeutic medications during his final months. He classified it as criminally negligent care of a terminally ill patient. The cancer would have killed him within 4 to 6 months regardless. Breyer had accelerated it by approximately 8 to 12 weeks. She pleaded guilty in late January 2026 to evidence tampering, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and 1 count of criminally negligent homicide of an elderly relative. She was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison plus 8 years in state prison to be served concurrently. She is now at FMC Carswell in Fort Worth. Renton Callaway pleaded guilty to the financial crimes only. He is serving 12 years. My father was buried on the Saturday after Thursday, 1 day later than originally scheduled. Hollis Tremaine prepared a new chest. Same dimensions, same walnut, same brass fittings. Hollis sealed it personally with my father's signet ring. I did not put the original wooden bird back in the chest. My father had told me to take it home and carve another one for him. I carved the new bird in my workshop over the course of 3 nights. I am not a good carver. The new bird is also crude. It also has uneven wings. It also has the kind of paint job that an 8-year-old would do, because I painted it the way I would have painted it as an 8-year-old. Blue body, red wings, a small black eye. I sealed the new bird inside the new chest the morning of the funeral. He was buried with it on Saturday at 10 o'clock. The original wooden bird sits on my desk in my study now. I look at it every morning when I sit down to work. Lennox lives with me. She has not seen her mother in person since the morning of the arrest. She has decided, on her own, that she does not want to visit her mother at the prison until she is 16. I have agreed to support whatever she decides. Adair told me, 3 weeks after the arrest, that she had always thought there was something off about Breyer. She had not said anything because she thought she was being a judgmental sister. I told her there was nothing to apologize for. I told her our father had warned me on the night he met her, and I had ignored him. The signs had been there. I had wanted not to see them. Sometimes I sit on the dock at his old house, which is now my house since I inherited it, and I watch the sunrise over the bay. The dock is the same dock where my wife pushed the carpet into the water at 3:27 a.m. The water is the same water that held the chest for 90 minutes. The boards are the same boards I sat on as an 8-year-old, learning how to tie a clove hitch. I think about my father every day. I think about the 6 months he spent gathering evidence while his wife slowly killed him. I think about the dosages he must have known were too low. I think about the pain he must have endured silently because he could not tell his oncologist what he suspected without alerting Breyer. I think about him sitting in his study in November, 2 weeks before his death, writing the letter that would only be read if his plan worked. He hoped his wife was not the woman he feared she was. He was not wrong, but he was prepared. My wife thought she was throwing my father's secret into the bay. Instead, she pulled his revenge out of the grave. She tried to steal the one thing my father wanted to take with him. All she did was prove he had known the truth all along. That is enough. That is enough.